And then I'll introduce Rachel to us. Dear God, we thank you so much for the opportunity to learn. We thank you so much for Rachel and for her faithfulness. I pray that your Holy Spirit will be with her as she shares the way that you have led her. And I pray that you'll help us to ask those questions, to get as much as you want us to get out of it, as far as looking to see the things that you have done in Rachel's life and being able to learn from them. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, it's my great pleasure to welcome Rachel Schmitz. This morning she graduated in 2011 from our program and is now working with Safe Passage out of Guatemala City. So I'm just going to, that's my brief cursory introduction. I'm going to turn it over to you, Rachel. Rachel, thank you so much. Please join me and welcome me, Rachel, too.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. As Dr. Bronco said, I'm an Eastern alum. I'm actually a two-time alum because I went here for undergrad as well. So I graduated in 2008 with a BA in Communication Studies and a Spanish minor, and then I came back for this program. Graduated in December 2011 with my MA in International Development. So now I'm working for Safe Passage, or Camino Seguro, and we operate out of Guatemala City, Guatemala, and I work in our U.S. office, which is outside of Portland, Maine. So I'm going to be sharing this morning about Safe Passage, our work, what we're doing, and then also telling you a little bit about my personal experience, what it was like, to go through this program and what I've done since then, and of course there'll be time at the end for all of your questions. So to start off, I'm going to show a video about Safe Passage. It kind of will give you an idea about our work, what the program is like, our mission, to give you a general sense of the organization. So we're going to start with that. Oh, and I should mention, this video is made by Guatemalan Youth Station. So it's not extremely cheesy, but it's a little like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Guatemalan culture. It's like, here, give me this one. But it'll give you a taste of the.
Miles de guatemaltecos que trabajan en el relleno sanitario de la zona 3 en la ciudad de Guatemala es poco conocida. Basta dar un vistazo para comprobar la gran necesidad que ésta sea transformada, pero ¿bastará eso para que tomemos parte en lograrlo? Esperamos que sí. Bienvenido a otro especial a fondo de Noticiero Guatevisión. Soy Haroldo Sánchez y le invito a ver esta realidad y a conocer el trabajo de Camino Seguro.
Cada día en el relleno sanitario de la zona 3 en la ciudad de Guatemala, unas 3.000 personas trabajan para ganar su sustento y en la mayoría de los casos el de sus familias. Son padres, madres, hijos, hermanos que arriesgan la vida.
Una luz de gigantescas proporciones causó muerte y dolor en
El 20 de junio del 2008, decenas fallecieron en una luz. Aunque sus dimensiones captaron la atención de los ciudadanos, en pocos días otros hechos ocuparon la mente de todos. A diario, los recicladores, más conocidos por el sobrenombre de guajeros, se arriesgan en los pequeños o grandes deslaves que no se reportan. Muchos desaparecen llevados por la corriente del río mientras buscan metales preciosos. Otros desaparecen entre la basura. En 1997, una veinteañera estadounidense visitó el país. Invitada por una amiga, conoció el relleno sanitario. En esa época, los recicladores se veían en la necesidad de llevar a sus niños con ellos al trabajo.
El tiempo que yo estuve ahí era bastante triste, ¿verdad? Porque había muchas mamás que en ese tiempo tenían a sus bebés tan pequeños y tenían que dejarlos como en un lugar y a veces también pienso que un poco la mamá, por falta de información, ella no tomaba en cuenta ciertos, como te digo, ciertas medidas de seguridad, ¿verdad?, para con sus hijos. Entonces algunos de los niños morían porque un camión pasaba muy cerca o qué sé yo, alguien no se fijaba les botaba algo encima o cosas como esas, ¿verdad? Entonces, y la mamá no podía reclamar porque no tenía cómo, ¿verdad?
Henry Dinning quedó impactada por esta realidad y se negó a simplemente sacudir la cabeza. Llamó a sus padres en Maine, Estados Unidos, y les pidió que vendieran todas sus pertenencias. Henry decidió que estos niños no podían continuar así, y ella tenía que hacer algo al respecto. Los niños en el basurero necesitaban esperanza, educación y oportunidad. Con cerca de $2,000 que logró reunir, se quedó en el país. Pidió ayuda a una iglesia local que le prestó una clase para realizar su sueño. Llena de fe y amor, el ángel del basurero empezó a tocar puertas buscando niños a los cuales brindar nuevas oportunidades. Afrontó la discriminación y la desconfianza por ser extranjera, pero eso no la desanimó. Así empezó Camino Seguro.
Safe Passage cannot afford the school supplies, uniforms, and enrollment fee required by the public schools.
Este fue el inicio del cambio.
The poverty is extreme, but this is the only reality that these children know. This is their world. My name is Hanley Denning, and I've spent the past 2 years working on behalf of children and families here in Guatemala. I have always been guided by a strong commitment to helping at-risk children and their families. The suffering among the children living and working here in the Guatemala City dump is a reality that I cannot turn away from, because I believe that with your help and with ongoing caring, support, and persistence, that we can help them make a change and help them have a future.
El 18 de enero del año 2007, Henry falleció en un accidente de tránsito, pero su sueño y trabajo se convirtieron en una semilla que continúa dando una abundante cosecha.
Thousands of children who live and work in the Guatemala City garbage dump will have no future unless someone helps. We hope that someone will be you, for the sake of the children.
Este lugar hoy está transformado. Henry trabajó consiguiendo recursos para construir un lugar seguro, en donde los niños encontraran esperanza y oportunidades por medio de la educación, y lo logró. Pocos días después de su muerte se inauguró el Centro de Estimulación Temprana.
La guardería acá a los alrededores del basurero significa muchísimo, porque es un oasis en medio de un desierto. Comenzamos cantando. Casi toda nuestra clase es de canciones y juegos. ¿Cómo aprenden ellos? Dejando que exploren en todas las diferentes áreas que tenemos, sensoriales, prematemáticas, el juego de mesa también, ¿verdad? Que es donde tenemos rompecabezas y muchísimas cosas que a ellos les interesa, ¿verdad? Tratamos la manera de poner juegos que a ellos les interese, que ellos lleguen y digan, ay, yo quiero ver esto, ¿cómo se hace, verdad? Y es así como nosotros les inculcamos y les enseñamos a ellos a que vengan y experimenten. Y es satisfactorio ver cómo van creciendo aquí. Y de hecho es nuestro programa, ¿verdad? Plantando semillas. Acá sembramos la semilla para que un día nuestros niños sean unos grandes abetos, ¿verdad? Y que puedan ser fuertes y valientes para enfrentar la vida allá.
Imagino que si aprendo a leerle a mis niños un cuento, palabra a palabra, principio a final. Imagino que es posible que un día sus sueños se hagan realidad.
Lo que se inició con la fe de una joven estadounidense y ese compromiso del que ella misma hablaba y que lo hizo realidad a través de un trabajo por los más necesitados de este sector, hoy continúa dando frutos. Esa escena en donde la vieron que estaba en el basurero es ahora tan distinta, porque es en ese preciso lugar que hoy está el Centro de Estimulación Temprana, conocido como la guardería. Para conocer más de la vida de las personas en este lugar, decidimos estar con Domingo y su familia, y esto es lo que nos compartieron.
Domingo y su esposa inician la jornada en la madrugada. Los niños un poco más tarde se preparan para ir a estudiar. Ahora su madre sale a trabajar.
A las 9 me voy yo para abajo. Yo trabajo allá en el relleno sanitario.
El calor, el gas metano, la contaminación, miles de personas, los opilotes y muchas veces la lluvia son sus compañeros de trabajo. Seleccionar lo mejor del plástico, papel, aluminio, ropa, juguetes o joyería entre toneladas de basura dentro del perímetro en el cual se le permite trabajar es una tarea ardua.
Es un poco difícil trabajar porque hay veces que hay y hay veces que no hay. Y por el barranco que está peligroso.
La competencia es fuerte.
Cada quien juntamos las cosas. Lo que encontramos, cada quien va haciendo sus cosas.
Dentro de los recicladores hay estructuras. La territorial se respeta totalmente. No existe un horario específico. Cada quien saca lo que puede.
Yo, aparte de mi cacha y las otras también, allá abajo no se gana mucho, solo de 25 a 30 quetzales es lo que se gana diario.
Mientras ella trabaja, sus hijos hoy disfrutan de mejores oportunidades. Luego de clases asisten al Centro de Refuerzo Educativo, creado por Camino Seguro.
Camino Seguro tiene este centro de refuerzo educativo con la finalidad de poder atender a los niños en una jornada alterna a la jornada en la cual ellos estudian. Un centro de refuerzo educativo es un lugar donde los niños pueden tener un espacio para venir a elaborar sus tareas, un espacio en el cual ellos se sientan confortables, un ambiente limpio, agradable, un espacio en donde ellos vengan a reforzar los contenidos que en las escuelas quizás no han sido bien entendidos.
Nos enseñan arte, nos enseñan computación y me enseñan matemáticas.
También nos enfocamos en otras áreas extracurriculares, siempre de crecimiento y de desarrollo personal. Estamos hablando de expresión creativa, estamos hablando de biblioteca, el propio laboratorio de computación, clases de inglés, un programa de juego y deporte, en el cual estamos trabajando una metodología que les ayuda a ellos a poder ser líderes juveniles, una metodología en la cual ellos desarrollen aptitudes y valores.
Aquí trabaja Domingo.
Mi nombre es Domingo González López. Trabajo en Camino Seguro y me dedico a la limpieza. Tengo 6 miembros de mi familia, una de mis hijos, y tengo 2 varones y 4 mujercitas. Pues esta relación con la tragedia pues comenzó. Yo vivía en una segunda vida de la zona 7 de la Navidad. Ahí vivíamos una mojarita en un palomar. Cuando llega ella con el profesor Claudio por primera vez, profesor Claudio y señor Maribel, y pues ahí comenzó mi relación con la pinadita, ¿no? Por medio de mi hijo, que ella nos puede pegar al niño, ¿no? Nos dijo que si le dábamos al niño para que fuera a estudiar a Camino Seguro, pues esa escuelita estaba por la puerta del basurero, pleno sanitario, en una iglesita. Ellos estaban ahí, habían como unos 8 niños o 10 niños cuando comenzó él a estudiar.
1 a 1, 2 a 2, 3 a 3, voy cambiando el mundo de a uno.
muy especial, con mi familia, más que mi familia, con mi mamá allá.
1 y 1, 2 más 2, 3 más 3, voy sumando alegrías y fe.
Yo a veces no quisiera irme de aquí. Cuando los feriados, yo me voy triste porque digo, ¿qué van a comer los niños cuando salimos? No salimos de vacaciones. Porque hay madres que van abajo a trabajar, dejan sus hijos y hay niños comen o no comen, ellos se mantienen en la calle. Cambio aquí ellos saben la hora de venir a almorzar, ni en la reparación del desayuno, en la reparación de las 3 de la tarde que bajan a refaccionar, o el maestro sube con su canasta pero sí me siento muy contento de trabajar en Camino Seguro y yo digo, en mí mismo digo, Dios mío, ayúdame Señor, dame valor, dame fuerza para seguir trabajando por los niños. Y yo trabajo, lo hago por ellos. A veces digo yo quiero ser alguien muy profesional, pero no tuve esa dicha. Mis padres fueron muy pobres y no pude estudiar, pero con ellos estoy yo aprendiendo un poco de estudio. Soy muy feliz. Me siento orgulloso de trabajar con Camino Seguro.
1, 1, 2 a 2, 3 a 3, voy cambiando mi vida un día a la vez.
Para mí es mejor que él se haya salido de abajo, ¿va? Porque como allá es muy peligroso, incluso él me dice a mí que no vaya, pero como hay veces que el dinero no alcanza, entonces por eso yo me voy a ayudarle a él también. Él trabaja allá en el proyecto y yo me voy para abajo. Yo quisiera trabajar en otra parte. No le podría decir en qué porque no sé, pues, pero cualquier trabajo que me pongan yo lo puedo hacer.
Imagino que hay un ángel que toma mi mano y me abraza los pies. Imagino que ese ángel que cuida a mis niños me cuida también.
Que ellos estudien y que tengan pues más grandes, que tengan un buen trabajo, porque no quiero que ellos trabajen donde yo estoy.
Yo quiero ser cuando sea grande, ser un abogado, ayudar a la gente necesitada y esperar que sigan adelante también, apoyándose.
Yo me estoy preparando a ser veterinaria, que quiero ser veterinaria, cuidar a los perros y los perros que están en la calle. Y por eso estoy aquí, para que me enseñen más.
Ellos valen mucho para mí, sí, son tesoros que tengo yo aquí.
Imagino que es posible que un día sus sueños se hagan realidad.
La familia González es una de las alcanzadas por Camino Seguro. Los hijos están aprovechando la oportunidad en el centro de refuerzo. Domingo, el padre, tiene un trabajo que ama y esperan por la oportunidad de un trabajo más seguro para Norma. Hoy tienen la posibilidad de un mejor futuro. Camino Seguro.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. The video is a little bit longer, and I'll be sure to leave one with someone, so if you're interested in seeing more of it, you can see that.
I'd like to know where he got his toupee.
I know, the Guatemalan newspaper. You gotta love it. Okay, so as you saw in the video, City Passage or Camino Seguro, our mission is to empower through education. So our mission statement is to empower the poorest, at-risk children and families working in the community of the Guatemala City Archtown by creating opportunities and fostering dignity through the power of education. So in the video you got to see a little bit about Guatemala and the city and the dump community, but just a little bit of context for you. Guatemala is a former Spanish colony. It's a majority indigenous country, so there are over 20 indigenous people groups and indigenous languages in Guatemala. There was a very long civil war, 36-year civil war, and that ended in 1996 with the signing of the Peace Accords. But during the Civil War, a lot of people fled to Guatemala City, hoping to find, better work, better opportunities. Unfortunately, a lot of them weren't educated, didn't have anywhere to live, and a lot of them ended up going to the dump to work there and to live in that community. The majority of the families living around the dump are just squatting. They don't own the land. They just have built little, tin shacks, and that's where they're making their home. Education is, I would say, not a high priority, but that's because of lack of economic resources. So Guatemala as a whole, about 20% of people graduate from high school. So it's not common to, go to high school or sometimes even middle school. Guatemala City is the largest city in Central America. Like much of Latin America, there are huge divisions between the rich and the poor. So, a small percentage of rich people and a lot of poor people, and not really a middle class. Obviously, the people we're serving are those with lack of resources. So, Hanley Denning, our founder, started working in the dump community in 1999. For a while, we've been serving these people and observing their living conditions, their lives, but we had never really done a study. So in January of this year, we did a census of our families. So we were able to survey 91% of the families that we serve, and we were able to get a little bit more information about, kind of what are their lives like, living conditions, things like that. And so this is one of those things that came out of that survey. The average family size is 6 people, and in general, they're living on $3 a day per family, and that breaks down to about 50 cents per person. So clearly, they're living in extreme poverty conditions. I believe the World Bank's definition of extreme poverty is $1.25 a day. So clearly, a lot lower. Another thing we learned from our census is that 80% of the families are led by single women, oftentimes mothers, grandmothers, aunts. So a lot of them are, moms just trying to do the best they can to provide for their families. So in the video, I think you got a great idea of what the garbage dump is like. Basically, people going through the garbage trying to find things to recycle. And they're looking for things that, things that we recycle. So cardboard, glass, plastic, things like that. It's really hard labor. It's not easy. It's very competitive. There's 3,000 people roughly that work in the garbage dump, and they're all competing, for the same different materials. It's smelly. The conditions, are just awful. They're there, rain or shine. They're there every day, and it's just a really hard life. I think in the video the woman said it's arduous. It's just not easy. Children aren't allowed to work in the dump, and that was a recent law. So supposedly anyone younger than 14 years old isn't allowed to work in the dump, but there's still ways for kids to sneak in. So that's a challenge that we face too. Sometimes our students are receiving a lot of pressure, to go to work for the family, and we want them to continue their education. And for some families, they're now in their second or third generation of people working the garbage dump. So it's sometimes, grandma or grandpa, and then the parents, and then the children. And another challenge we face is that there's a really strong prejudice against the people working in the dump. We heard in the video they're called guajeros, and just people think they're dirty, that they steal, that they're not intelligent. All of these negative connotations. So for our students, they're facing a lot of challenges. The family income, like I said, is 50 cents per person per day, roughly. And that's earned through the manual labor of working in the garbage dump. And it fluctuates depending on how much they gather. The one woman referred to her catch, and that's what they call what they're gathering. So here in this photo you see our founder, Hanley Denning. As you heard in the video, she was a young woman from Maine, and that's why our U.S. office is in Maine. A little strange, but she's from Yarmouth, outside of Portland area. And she was a young woman, a teacher, and a social worker. Went to Guatemala to learn Spanish, And on her last day, someone said, "Come see the dump." And she said, "I don't want to see the dump. I don't want to go there." You know, she knew, she had an idea of what it was going to be like. But sure enough, she went, and you know, her life was forever changed because she saw these kids in the dump, and she started talking to people, hearing that, you know, the parents didn't have money to send the kids to school. And she saw these kids working, and it just broke her heart, and she said, "I have to do something." So from there, she started Safe Passage. It started in a church that she was borrowing from a nun she had met. You know, it was dirty, there were rats, but she didn't care. She just wanted to give a safe place for the kids to come and give a snack and help them with their homework. So that's how Safe Passage started. As you heard in the video, Hanley was tragically killed in 2007. She was in a car accident in Guatemala. But amazingly, the program has lived on and has actually grown quite a bit since 2007. And so it's inspiring to see that her dream, you know, is going forward. So a little bit more about our different programs. So we have a couple different centers. The first one is the Early Childhood Education Center, or down there we call it the Escuelita Little School. And this is for children as young as 2 years old as 6. And it's a full day program. So one challenge that the moms have is that if they're sending their older kids to school and they're going to work in the dump, what are they going to do with their little babies, you know? And previously they had taken them to the dump. So this gives them another option of sending them to our program. They're safe, you know, they're learning, we provide them with a meal. We use a methodology called planting seeds, and it's based on interactive play and doing activities and just hands-on learning, just learning through playing, basically. And these little guys are just so cute. I got to see them. I was there in April, and they're just adorable. And a lot of studies have shown how important it is for the early childhood education because kids are developing so much when they're so young. So we really believe this is, you know, critical to our mission, providing care for these, you know, our youngest students. Our other center is the Educational Reinforcement Center. It's kind of a funny name, but it comes from the Spanish for reforzamiento. And basically, the kids are going to school for half the day. So in Guatemala, the school day is just half the day, either in the morning or the afternoon, and that's countrywide. So when the kids aren't going to school, they come to our center, the Reinforcement Center, where they have their class, they have their teacher, and they're working on their homework, but also working on improving their math skills, reading skills, things like that. We also have a lot of other programs that I'll speak about, English and art and different things. And so we're really just trying to give them the tools they need to succeed and to be able to move forward in their education. Also, this year we added our own first grade. So Safe Passage has historically been basically an after-school program or before school, depending on when the kids come. But this year, we actually started becoming a school. So we have first grade, and then in 2014, we'll have second grade. So we're slowly shifting a little bit. We have a Guatemalan staff, and then we also have a lot of international volunteers. So we have over 80 Guatemalan staff, teachers, social workers, different folks, and then we have our international volunteers. And we rely really heavily on international volunteers. We have about 70 every year, most of them from the States and from Canada and sometimes Europe as well. And they're all working together in the classroom. We have over 550 students. So it's quite a lot. 100 of the younger students in the Escuelita and about 450 in the Reinforcement Center. So it's a pretty busy, happening place. And then of course we have our U.S. office, that's where I work. There's just 5 of us. And it's a development office focused on fundraising. So with our volunteers, something they often do is teach English because we provide 30 minutes of English to our students every day. And that's from the littlest ones to the 12th graders. And it's great for them because they get to learn with a native speaker. And so that's something our volunteers often do, give English classes. tutoring, we found that a lot of our students were behind. They weren't on grade level. They were a year or 2 years behind. And so we had a volunteer that decided to start a tutoring program. And so that's working one-on-one with students, usually on math and reading skills. And we've seen a lot of improvement from that individualized attention. And so not all of our students receive tutoring, but those that are behind will receive it. And it's always one-on-one. Our social work department, our family and community services, so we have a team of social workers and psychologists that are working with the students and working with the families. And so one of the things we're tracking is the attendance, not only at Safe Passage, but their attendance at school. And so our social workers are keeping track of that every month, making sure they have good attendance. If they don't have good attendance, trying to talk to the family and the student, finding out what's going on. As you can imagine, these families are facing a lot of challenges. So this is a big support for them, the social workers, and then also the psychologists as well. So this is a little bit more about the different programs we offer. So it's not just reading and writing. We have a sports program. We actually have had a lot of teens come down, and we receive short-term, we call them support teams, and they brought lacrosse to Guatemala. So you wouldn't expect that, but we have lacrosse. All the kids know how to play lacrosse. We have the equipment, obviously soccer, basketball, things like that. I know for a lot of U.S. folks, it doesn't sound that exciting. It's like, what a big deal, sports. But for these kids, this is their only opportunity to do something like this. So it's really special, and it provides them just, a positive outlet, a place to just have fun and be a kid and not really worry about the stress of life. We also have our creative expression program, and so that consists of music, art classes, dance classes. We actually have a break dancing club, which is really cool. So again, just trying to give the kids a way to express themselves and learn and grow, and just discover new talents and new abilities. We also have a health clinic on site, and so that's really important because most of these families don't have any kind of medical care. So the kids can come to the clinic, get checked. We have a full-time nurse and a part-time doctor, and we have a clinic at both of our centers. So it's great support for the families. The families can come as well, and we also do health education for the students and the parents, things about hygiene, things like that. And that's through a partner organization called Shared Lead. So as was mentioned in the video, a lot of our parents haven't studied, and it's not because they just didn't want to study, it's because they weren't able to. They just didn't have the resources, and it breaks my heart on the video when Domingo says, I didn't have good luck. I didn't have good luck. I wasn't able to. And that's the case for most of our parents. 1 in 3 adults of Safe Passage students, parents hasn't studied, and those that have only gone on to the 4th grade. So we realized we need to do something for these families. So we started an adult literacy program, and it's a chance for the parents to come back to school and study. And most of them start out in elementary school, but we do have some that have gone on to middle school and high school as well. So one of our programs that I love, because I'm very passionate about empowering women, is our social entrepreneurship program. And so this is focused on the mothers, and the idea is providing them a different opportunity. So instead of going to the dump, providing a different way to make an income. And so we have a couple different initiatives. One is called Creamos, and that's what these ladies are in. And they take magazines, recycled magazines, and they cut them and roll them into beads. And actually this necklace I have up here is an example of that. And so the women are making these. They're selling them in Guatemala at Safe Passage, and also at a store. It's called Semaco. I don't know what it would be the equivalent of here, kind of like a department store. And so it's a great opportunity for them. And for the moms, they're actually earning 70% more than what they were making working in the dump. So So not only are they earning more, they're working, you know, in a safe place. They're getting to work with each other because, like, as I mentioned in the dump, you know, you're just out for yourself. You know, you're competing. But here, the women are working together, so it also forms a sense of camaraderie, friendship. We also have a sewing initiative that began this year. The women are learning how to use industrial-sized sewing machines. And our hope is that they'll be making uniforms, they'll be making shirts for safe passage. In the beginning, though, they're just learning how to use the machines because most of them have never sewed before. And then we have another program called WHITE, which is an economic income generating opportunity for a few women. And here you can see the growth of Creamos. That's the jewelry initiative that every year we've been having more participation and their sales have been increasing. So it really has been quite successful. Speaking of success, our goal is for our students to graduate, but I will say a lot of students don't make it this far for various reasons and challenges. We've had about 50 children graduate from high school. Last year we had 13 graduates. This year we'll have about 10. But we started having a little problem or a challenge we found. We found that the students were graduating from high school, but then, you know, they were done with Safe Passage, and what then? Out into the real world they go. When we realized they needed some more support. So we started a new program this year called Next Step, or Proximal Paso. And the mission or idea of that program is to help our students to the next step. And for most of them, that means finding formal employment. For some of them, it does mean going on to higher education. And we've actually had great success helping our students find jobs. And it's about more than just finding jobs, though. It's teaching them how to write a resume, how to interview, how to network. You know, again, they have just faced a lot of discrimination. They haven't really had a lot of contact outside of their community. So they need to learn, you know, how to go on a job interview, how to speak with people. And it's been really great because those that have gone on to find jobs have come back and given workshops to our students, kind of giving them tips, helping them get different connections. So we've seen a lot of success in that program so far. So like I mentioned, our graduates from last year have gone on to find employment. And one of the best jobs they can find, which may sound strange, but is working in a call center in Guatemala City. And the students that are working in a call center that are bilingual, Spanish and English, are actually earning nearly 5 times the amount of the average income of a Safe Passage family. So I know for us it doesn't sound very exciting or glamorous working in a call center, but for our students we found this is a great area where they can be working and aiming towards. So that has been really exciting. Just a little bit about Safe Passage, our funding. Here you see a breakdown of where we get our different funds from. A big part of it is sponsorship, and I'm sure you all are familiar with sponsorship programs. You know, you pay a certain amount per month, sponsor a student. Also our annual campaign, which is mostly done via mail. Those are the main areas. I work with our sponsorship program. That's one of my roles in the U.S. office, being a sponsorship liaison, trying to recruit sponsors, talk about our program. And we found that sponsorship is a great, opportunity for our students and for people in the States. It helps them connect with our work, and it also gives encouragement to our students. We've actually had some students, one last year, he graduated and he had a sponsor, his whole time. So it was a great experience for him and his sponsor to go all the way from elementary school to graduating high school. Another part of our program is sport teams. Those are 1 week, service trips, missions trips, where teams come down for 7 days. They work with our programs, work with our students in the classroom. That's another thing that I do as part of my role here in the U.S., recruiting people to go down. So I wanted to speak just for a minute about creating long-term change. And since I know you all are studying international development, you know, as you saw in the video, it started with Hanley. And I didn't know her personally, but I've heard a lot about her. And I don't think she had the savior mentality, you know, like, I'm going to, you know, these people are so poor and they need help. I really feel like from what I've heard about her, she wanted to work in partnership with the community, but, you know, it's always a challenge, you know, trying not to go in and just fix it and do what you think is best. And I would say in recent years, the past few years, we've really tried to work to become a development organization, not just a charity, you know, doing good things, but really trying to empower the different people. So some of the ways that we're doing that, working with the community. So working with the parents, that's a big factor. You know, they're such key stakeholders, and getting them involved in the process is really critical. So a few things that we do, we have monthly meetings where Safe Passage closes and the parents come that day. So the kids don't come, the parents come. And we have different workshops for the parents. And it's also a chance for them to meet with the teachers and the social workers, check to see how their student is doing, and just involve them in the process. This year we also started a parents committee, so it's kind of like a PTA. You know, the parents are representing the parents' interests and helping us as we move forward with our vision, so they can give their opinion and help guide us in that process. One challenge I wanted to mention, which you might have picked up on, but our executive director, Richard Schmaltz, he always likes to talk about this. He says that our students are facing poverty, you know, extreme material poverty, and that's clear. But something that they're also facing is this, he calls it poverty of self-esteem. And it's kind of just this idea, you know, like, I'm from the dump, you know, I work with garbage, I am garbage. You know, it sounds awful, but it is something that our students are facing because they haven't seen people go on to find formal employment. They haven't seen people work other than in the dump and in the community. And so I think a big part of our work and what we're doing is trying to encourage our students, like, you can go on to do something different. You can find a job that's not in the dump. You know, you are capable, you are smart, you do have skills. And that's something that takes a lot of time. That's not something you can just change overnight. And I think we're starting to see a change, but, you know, it will take generations to really make that change happen. Another thing I wanted to note about being development focused and kind of this idea of creating long-term change is being very focused on our mission. I think I work with a lot of organizations that do kind of a little bit of everything. And I would say with Safe Passage, we're really trying to focus on education. You know, that's what we're about, that's what we're working towards. And it's not easy because people come along and they say, oh, we want to hand out water filters. Don't you want to hand out water filters? You know, we want to build houses. Don't you want to build houses? But I would say we're really trying to keep our focus on education so we can do that and do it well. Personally, I work with organizations that have done a little bit of everything. And to be honest, they did a little bit of everything, but they didn't really do anything really that great. So I think focusing on providing education and empowering through education helps us to create that long-term change. I'll stop there with the challenges. There's certainly a lot more that we're facing that I can talk to you about afterwards if you like. Just a little bit about me, and then I'll open up to you all for questions. So after I graduated from Eastern, or I guess I didn't graduate, I went for my field practicum. I got married, that's my husband, Daniel, and he's actually an Eastern alum too. He went to undergrad here and he went to Palmer, the seminary. For my field practicum, we went to Bolivia, Cochabamba. We were working with an organization called MAP. We were there for a little while. We thought we were going to be there for a year. Didn't turn out that way. We had a lot of visa problems. So we ended up in Guatemala, and we were living in Panajachel, and that's Lake Atchilon up there. It's really beautiful, even more beautiful in person. We were working with an organization called Mayan Families, and we were there for a little over a year. And I was working with the sponsorship program, helping to run their sponsorships program, which was huge, over 1,000 students. And so I was working there, and I would say, you know, personally, my passion is more working on the ground with people. And I like living in Latin America, we both do. But we decided to kind of change things up, come back to the States. And that's when I came back to work with Safe Passage. That was in April. And we moved back from Guatemala. But while we were there in Guatemala, we adopted a little furry friend. And that's our dog, Lucia. We brought her back with us. And she lives with us in Portland. But I have worked with a lot of different organizations in Guatemala, Bolivia, studied abroad in Costa Rica. So I do feel like I have a sense of kind of what it's like to work on the ground. And now my job, working with Safe Passage, it's more the U.S. side of things. So basically fundraising, trying to generate the revenue to keep our programs going, which is definitely new for me. It's not something that I had done previously, on a large scale. But then also doing outreach, and that's recruiting volunteers and sponsors and giving presentations, things like that. So I would love to answer your questions about Safe Passage, about me, anything you would like to know. Fire away. Yes, Dr.
Yeah, I've known Rachel since she was maybe a freshman. When the first Dominican Republic trip you went on?
Yes.
Was that before you had become a Spanish?
I was a freshman, yeah.
Yeah. And but I mean, it was really interesting because I watched you go through the whole transition with Spanish. You want to say something about, many times in development classes, I feel like language is just not talked about enough. What have you learned about the importance of learning a second language, and what were the most helpful ways in learning Spanish, developing Spanish?
Sure. Yeah, I started learning Spanish when I was an undergrad student here at Eastern, and as Dr. Unander said, my love for Latin America actually began going on a mission trip to the Dominican Republic. It was my first time out of the U.S., and wow, was it a life-changing, eye-opening experience. But I think for me...
3 years later, she was the trip leader.
I kept going back again and again. I think for me the most helpful thing with learning language was studying abroad. So I went to Costa Rica for a semester and did a program called the Latin American Studies Program. And I lived with a Costa Rican family. So I think as far as my language learning, that's really, I just had to learn because there weren't any other options. They didn't speak English. So that was incredibly helpful. I will say learning another language, knowing Spanish for me has been really helpful. I feel that it has helped me find jobs. I will say that my Spanish is good, but it's not, amazing. I can't compare to a native speaker or someone, that's Latino but grew up in the States. But I do think it's really helpful. When we were in Guatemala, I should mention, we were working with indigenous people. So their first language was actually an indigenous language, Hachikel, in other areas, Uchuil. So Spanish was their second language, and it was our second language, which is kind of nice. But for that reason, sometimes they weren't speaking in the right tense, and I wasn't speaking in the right tense. And now, working with my coworkers in Guatemala City, I definitely notice a difference just in the way they speak. It's less formal, the words they use sometimes, it's hard for me to understand them. So it's definitely a process, I don't feel like, I have arrived, I'm great at Spanish. It's something that I'm always working on. But I do think it's helpful. So I would say if you kind of have an idea of where you want to be working and living, if you haven't started learning a language, I would encourage you to start. And if you already know something, to keep working on it for sure. Yes?
Yeah. I wanted to know if you have partnership with companies or other organizations that are more likely to hire the children after the finish from the school or from college, and how hard or easy for them to be accepted in a higher institution after graduating?
Yeah, great question. We do have some partnerships. That's something that's definitely new, and it basically started this year with this program I was speaking about, Next Step, where we realized we needed to create these partnerships. So with the call center, Transact Health, we have a partnership with them, and where we're kind of sending them graduates. It's still very competitive though. Like even for our graduates, they were accepted into a training program. the training program was 3 months, and then it got extended, another month, and then they had to take an exam. And then they got accepted, which not all of them did. Some of them had to go on for more training. So we're definitely trying to create those partnerships, but it's not easy. You know, it's not like we can just say, oh, hey, we'll send you our graduates, and they say, great. So that's one example of a partnership. There are a few universities we've been talking to about sending them our students and exploring the possibility of getting scholarships. So that's another thing we're working on. I would say we're definitely in the beginning stages of that work. It's definitely a need we have, but it's definitely a new area where we're working as well. I'm trying to think if we have any other. Those are the main things that come to mind. But I mean, I think we would like to see that aspect grow, where we have partnerships with multiple companies and not just we're going to the call center, you know, that we could offer more variety to our students. And I think in time that will come. And I think as we have graduates go on and work for different companies, the doors will start to open for those connections. And as people have good experiences with our graduates, they become more willing to receive people. So I think that's a big part of it, you know, for our students going on, you know, they're representing us, and that's great, but it can also be really bad too, because if they get a job and then they don't show up, you know, that can close the door for future graduates. So that's another part of it, educating them, you know, like I said, how to be professional, how to interview, how to send a thank you, even if you interview and you don't get the job, you know, things like that. For us, maybe it seems, you know, common sense, but again, they haven't had the exposure to it, so it's a learning experience for them. Other questions? Yeah.
I would like to know a bit more about like the structure of the staff. And you said there's 80 staff in Guatemala. Are they all Guatemalan, or what is that like hierarchy structure that exists?
That's a good question. So we have an executive director, and he's on the ground. His name's Richard Schmaltz. He's actually Canadian, and he's been with us for 3 years. He's ending his time in December, so he's kind of like the head in Guatemala. And then we have our, what is her title in English? Her name is Mariela, and she basically is the director of the Reinforcement Center. So she oversees that facility. And then we have another woman that oversees the Escuelita, or the Early Childhood Education Center. And then from going down from them, we have department heads. So we have a head of the social work department, a head of the teachers. In Spanish, they call them encargados. I guess it would be kind of like a manager. And then we have our teachers. So in each classroom, you know, we have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and so on. Different social workers. We don't have that many social workers, about 7 social workers for all of our students. So you can imagine their caseloads are pretty high. And so the teachers, and then our kitchen staff, the janitors, people that clean, things like that. Security guards, I should mention. Guatemala City, it's dangerous, you know, it's not the safest area to work. So we have security guards at our buildings. We also have plainclothes security guards that are in the streets, kind of keeping an eye out for our students. And then as far as our volunteers are concerned, we have a couple different possibilities. We have long-term volunteers, and those are people that commit to being there for a year, and they hold coordinator roles. So for example, a common position is the support team coordinator. Those are the people that are being the facilitators for the week-long groups. And then we have a volunteer coordinator. He oversees all of our volunteers. He does recruiting, orientation, things like that, and then our volunteers are kind of like under him. He's overseeing them. And with our volunteers, we ask that they come for a minimum of 5 weeks, which sometimes might be a little strange because sometimes people want to volunteer for a week. But we have found that 5 weeks is kind of like the minimum to get acclimated to the program and really, you know, create some relationships, things like that. Did I answer your question? Okay, I don't know if it was clear. Yes.
Have you thought about doing some sort of technical education, like welding or masonry, kind of for those who might not see college as what they want to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that could be a really great possibility because it's true. A lot of our students, they might not want to go on to higher education. I think right now it would just be the lack of resources, not having, you know, an area for that as far as a physical building and land. I think that's definitely a possibility, and I think with the sewing initiative, we're, you know, moving that direction with the mothers, thinking, okay, let's teach them a skill that they can learn this, hone it, and this could be their skill where they earn their income. So that's certainly a possibility. I think kind of as we move forward, like I said, we have our first grade and we're adding second grade next year. As we start having, you know, more stability in that area, we will probably start expanding our programs as far as when it comes to the graduates. But I mean, that's a great idea. I think the biggest challenge would just be, you know, the funding for those specific programs and then lack of space, physical space.
Have you heard of any other agencies lobbying for different waste management to begin with there so that people don't have to work in those conditions?
Yeah, so you bring up an interesting point. A lot of people say, like, what about the government? What about, you know, things like that? People are picking through the trash and then they're gathering their recyclables, and then, no one asks this question, but oftentimes people say, well, what are they going to do with them then? They actually sell them to different, basically private business owners, a few different guys in the community that buy these different materials. And then they are exported because there aren't recycling facilities in Guatemala City. So there definitely has been talk, you know, of improving the conditions or creating a recycling facility, but I would say there hasn't really been any movement. You know, it'll be 15 years next year of us working in this community, and you know, sometimes things get started, but they're never really carried to completion. I've heard a lot from a lot of people that, you know, the government, they just don't really care, they don't want to be involved. There was a really big fire in 2005 where people died and it was very dangerous. And at that point, the government did step in. They said, they realized, okay, we have to do something. So at that point, they said that kids aren't allowed to work in the dump. So if you're younger than 14, you can't be in there. They also made everyone have ID badges so they can kind of keep track of people. You have to scan going in and out. So in that way, they tried to regulate, but as far as the conditions and the actual work, I would say there hasn't been very much movement. And I know there have been various private companies that have tried to work with the government to create recycling facilities, but for one reason or another, they always seem to not be carried through. And you know, it brings up an interesting point too. I mean, clearly the conditions our families are working in are awful, but you know, what would happen if Guatemala started recycling? You know, 3,000 people would be out of work. You know, I'm not saying that these people should go working the dump forever, but it does bring up a question. You know, what would these people do instead?
They could work in a facility where it's separated before it goes off to.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think it's really difficult to even understand what the families, you know, what the lifestyle is like. You know, I see the video, and when I was in Guatemala, we can't actually go in the dump; it's too dangerous. We don't go in, but we take our visitors on to like an overlook. You can see in the dump, and it's just, I mean, words can't really describe what it's like. And the smell is just absolutely unbearable. And you actually see the trucks going in, and the system they have is that people run up to the truck and they put their hand on the truck, and that's kind of their symbol saying, like, I claim this, like I'm gonna, like this is my truck. And about 20 people can claim the truck, and then that's their load. So again, you see that competitive nature of the work. Yeah.
Other than like a sponsorship donation, do you accept like clothing or school supplies?
We do, but I would say that kind of touches on like trying to stay focused, central to our mission. So in the past, we received lots of things. You know, anything someone wanted to give, we accepted it. But we started realizing a few things. One, it was tough to get things to Guatemala because there's not really a reliable shipping method, and there is shipping, but it's very expensive. And so we were sending things with people in their suitcases, and believe it or not, that's still how we're sending things, because that's the best way to get things down there. So if I'm ever traveling, or anyone is traveling, we're like, hey, can you take an extra suitcase? So we do accept things, but we started realizing we need to be more narrow and focused, only accepting the things that we really need. And also encouraging people, if they can, to give us monetary donations, because then we can buy things in Guatemala City. It's local, it's fueling the local economy. So there are some things we accept, and if you go on our website, there is a list of commonly needed items. I mean, you'll see on there, it's really, really specific. Like, it doesn't just say shampoo, it says travel size shampoo, 3 ounces or smaller. Like, really specific. But the reason is, we're only trying to accept the things that we need. And we don't do a lot of handing out those things. Some, but not, not a ton. So that's the other part of it. We don't want to have, these piles of things that we're not going to use. So I don't know why your question reminded me of this, but something I failed to mention, we use the reward system. Well, I'll call it rewards, it's kind of like bribery, which other NGOs use. So if the students have good attendance, and that's 90% coming to City Passage and to school, we give the families a food bag. So that's another thing, when the parents come for their monthly meeting, if their child has good attendance, we give them this food bag, and it's an encouragement to them to, keep coming and have good attendance. And it's nothing fancy, it's just, oil, rice, beans, staples. Yeah.
I enjoyed hearing about the small business enterprise. I just wanted to know how the women are chosen to be part of it.
Oh, how they're chosen. That's a good question. I would say there is an application process, but honestly, if they're a mother or a student, so right now it's limited to the mothers of our students. So it's just, if it's a woman in the community that just wants to be part of it, right now, we're not accepting them. But other than being a mother, if they want to be involved, we try not to limit it. They work with our social entrepreneurship coordinator, doing, a small interview, explaining the program and everything. But I would say that's kind of the application process of them being involved. One of the initiatives that I didn't talk too much about is called WIPE. I know that for those families, they based it on the families with the lowest economic income. So when the students enter our program, we do an economic study, basically like an intake, taking all their information, how much do they earn, what are their living conditions. So we use that to determine which women we're going to be in that program. But I would say, other than that, it's really based on interest. So some of the moms really like doing the jewelry, and they're creative, and they really like that. For some of the other mothers, that wasn't really their thing, and that's why the sewing initiative has been a better fit for them. And we hope that the sewing will be able to have even more women in the program after we get through this first phase of the training.
You mentioned earlier that it's only just within the country, only a small population is actually attending school. So you talked about teachers that are teaching at the school. How far they go in education, and what's your selection process?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so the stat was 20% of the Guatemalan population has graduated from high school. So something interesting about Guatemala is that you can actually become a teacher just from going to high school. So you don't have to attend university. So you can specialize. It's almost like technical school here, where you say, oh, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a nurse, things like that. So most of our teachers only have a high school level education. I would say as far as the selection process, every year we're posting the jobs just locally in the community, and it's kind of open. Most of the teachers are from the community, some from Antigua, which is the next town over that's very touristy, but it's only 45 minutes away. I would say with our teachers, most of them have taught in other places. One challenge that we face is that being a small NGO, we can't really pay that much of a competitive wage. So I would say that most of our teachers, they're working with us because they truly love the work in the programs, not because we're paying the big bucks. But some of our teachers have been with us 5, 6, 7 years. I know when I was there, I was interviewing a teacher, and she was telling me that she feels really passionate about the program because she's worked in other schools, and she saw that the the teaching style was just, repetition, memorization, and it wasn't really interactive. And so that's why she loves Safe Passage, because she felt like she gets to interact with the kids and teach them, like I said, this idea of learning through play. But all of our teachers are Guatemalan, and they are certified in Guatemala to be teachers. And then our volunteers are helping the classroom just as classroom assistants. And most of those people don't have a teaching background. They're just interested in working with children. And for our English program, our curriculum was developed by an ESL teacher, and then the materials were adapted for Guatemala, so they can be culturally relevant and all of that. But the people that come don't have to be certified to teach English.
How much of what you learned in this program prepared you for what you're doing?
That's a good question. I think in a lot of ways it did prepare me, but I think in other ways, being on the ground, you kind of just have to learn as you go. There's no better way. As far as things that really helped me from this program, there's a class, I think it's called Program Planning, and I forget the full title, Management. One thing that was really helpful was that class, and learning how to do, grants and different writing. I would say that pretty much every job I've ever looked at, they love it if you have experience writing grants or doing any type of fundraising. So I would say even if that's not your passion, those are great skills to have. Other classes, I think also the community development class, something I enjoyed, learning how to interact with people on the ground. But I would say, one challenge is that there are a lot of NGOs in the world, and it can be hard trying to find one that lines up kind of with your personal beliefs and ideas. The organization that I was working with previously in Guatemala, I was disappointed to get there and find that maybe their style of working and their mission wasn't really what I was passionate about. I would say it was more of an aid organization, kind of just like helping, but not really empowering the people. So I guess another piece of advice I would have is when you're thinking about going on to do your field practicum and then looking for work afterwards, to really dig in and get to know the organization as best as you can, asking questions, reading the website, talking with employees or former volunteers, so you get a really good sense of their work and what they're doing. Because it can be tough, and then you get to another country and you're like, here I am, and you made the commitment. I would say that I feel really fortunate to work with Safe Passage because I do believe in their mission, and what they're doing, and being able to be a part of that. Yep.
In the social entrepreneurship with the women, is there some sort of childcare, or do they get to bring their children? How does that work?
That's a good question. So usually they come during the day, so their kids are at school and they're in our program. But I will say that sometimes we have activities for them on the weekend. So we had a coordinator, she was a runner, and she was like, I'm going to start a running club. And the moms were like, okay. Never mind that the moms had never run before, and some of them showed up in their flip-flops. They had a running club, and they're encouraged to bring their kids. In Guatemala, it's family is so important, so they're welcome to bring their kids with them. Also, if they're coming to work on their jewelry, they can bring their kids as well. Again, most of them are in our program, but if there's ever a situation where they have a little baby or something, they can bring their child with them. With the women, like I was saying, seeing them work together has been really inspiring, because I think they just feel this sense of camaraderie and friendship with the other women. And not only do they have a running club, they also started doing yoga classes in the morning. So they'll come early and do yoga. Again, most of them haven't done yoga before, but it's just a fun chance for them to learn and grow and just be with other women, and not stressing about the worries, because as you can imagine, their lives are really stressful, trying to figure out how to provide for their families. Did you have a question?
Just quick, are there other organizations that are also working with the same people that you're working with?
Yeah.
And then, is there any kind of network of organizations like yours worldwide? Because I know this problem, and there are organizations working within other countries.
Right. So as far as Guatemala City, we work in zones 3 and 7, and there are other organizations working in the area. I would say kind of like in neighboring neighborhoods, so not the same families, but maybe like this next zone over. And two off the top of my head are Potter's House and Lemonade International, and they're both Christian NGOs that are working in the area. As far as a partnership with them or with other organizations, there's nothing that I know of. There might be something that exists, and it raises a great question. You know, there are dump communities, other places too. So I would be interested in learning about if there is something, you know, connecting them, but not one that I know of that we're working with currently.
What, is there any kind of a Christian component to Safe Passage?
Yeah, so to be simple, no. It's non-religious, non-political, and so I guess some people would ask me, you know, why are you working with them? But I feel that personally it's very holistic. And I feel like they are trying to meet people's needs on multiple levels. So even if it's not, you know, religious in the sense of like Bible studies, I feel that it is religious, if that makes sense. You know, meeting the material needs, but also I think like with the values, like every month we're teaching the kids a certain value, you know, like self-respect and different things like that. And so to me that feels, you know, very Christian and very holistic. So we're not technically religious, but I would say most of the students, you know, are religious, mostly Catholic, some Protestant, and we do work with a lot of churches, and a lot of the teens that come down are, you know, youth groups and things like that. So there's definitely support from faith communities, and you know, our students and families do have faith as part of their life. But as far as our, we're not, you know, pushing a certain message as far as that is concerned.
I've heard of kids that are in programs like this, sponsorship programs or orphanages and things like that, experiencing kind of persecution from other kids in the community that aren't involved in these programs. I guess they're envious and things like that. Have you experienced any of that, and if so, how do you address those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have definitely heard about that. I would say one way we address it is trying to treat the kids as equal as possible. So I would say in the community, it's definitely tough. You know, they know which kids go to Safe Passage because they're, you know, wearing the little shirts. But I would say that our families don't like flaunt it, and we're not like giving out big like gift baskets and different things. So I would say for them, you know, they're kind of just normal people that have this opportunity. I don't know how they handle it with their neighbors, but as far as our end, we're trying to just provide them, you know, with basic things, you know, with like the food bag. It's a food staple. It's nothing fancy, and trying, you know, to make sure they aren't standing out, you know? Like, for example, with our sponsorship program, we ask sponsors to only send, you know, we have a list of things they can send. It's like coloring book stickers, you know, like not expensive electronics or, you know, a computer, anything that would make the kids a target. But even within our program, we face that problem because some kids have sponsors that write them every month, and some kids have sponsors that they've never heard from, and some kids just don't have sponsors. So I would say within Safe Passage, trying to treat the families and the kids as equal as possible. And in the community, that's a good question. And I would be interested, honestly, to talk to a parent, because I can't speak on their behalf. I would say, I don't know. I would say them trying to just act as normal as possible, if that makes sense. You know, like not making a big deal out of it, like, oh, Safe Passage, I'm so special, you know. I would guess that if I asked a parent, you know, they would say something like, oh, when I talk to people, I just tell them, you know, I've received this great opportunity. And I think that for a lot of the families, if they don't already have kids in Safe Passage, many of them are on our waiting list. So, you know, we're trying to help as many people as we can. You know, we don't want it to be this thing like, oh, we're helping these people, but, oh, you other people, good luck. So we're trying to help as many people as we can. And I would be interested to know, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but the percentage of how many families we're helping in the community. I would guess, just a guess, that the majority of them do have at least one student in our program. But I don't know the stat off the top of my head. But, you know, we don't want to just be selective and help certain people. We do want to help the whole community.
When you do sponsorship, do you put all the money in the pool? And and then shared amongst all the children, or does only that family that is sponsored receive the money?
That's a great question. So it goes into a pool, and so the relationship for sponsorship is, individual. But if we look at where the money is allocated, it's to the general sponsorship program. I will say that the organization I worked with previously, they tried to keep everything separate, which is just insane accounting-wise. It's just really hard to do that and really unrealistic. So I was relieved to see Safe Passage puts it in a pool, and that's something we try to make clear. We try to be really transparent about our financials, about how we use the money, things like that. But I would say most people don't really think about that. They think, oh, I'm sponsoring Jose, and that's my student. But in all actuality, it does go to all of the students, and it goes to the general pool. And again, we try not to have that favoritism with the sponsors. So, if a sponsor wants to correspond with the student, that's fine, and send little presents. But we don't do anything like, say a sponsor says, oh, my kid's birthday is coming, I want to send $100, can you go buy him a bike? No, we wouldn't do that. We do give the kids birthday presents, but they all get the same thing, whether they have a sponsor or not. So again, you see that example of trying to keep the consistency. But, with over 500 students, it can be, really, really difficult. Yes?
My understanding, Safe Passage is actually an American organization, right? Stationed in.
So we're a 501c3 registered here in the U.S., but then we're also registered in Guatemala as a Guatemalan foundation, and it's Camino Socorro. Mm-hmm.
So do you, my understanding of these programs, you actually have to involve the government of that country. Mm-hmm. Have you had any problems in terms of, has the government approved all of your programs, or there been certain cases you've had problems?
In Guatemala?
Yes. It seems what you're doing is great, but have you had any problems in terms of, the government says, you can do this, but people are really suspicious of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as I know, no, but I'm not 100% sure of the structure. I know that in Guatemala you have to go through a process to become a foundation, similar to getting a nonprofit status, and I know we have done that many years ago. Other than that, I don't think the government is very involved. I think they kind of have the attitude of great, way to improve the community. For example, I know the U.S. ambassador to Guatemala visited us recently, and he loved our program so much he decided to send his son to volunteer with us. So the interactions we have with different government officials have been positive, and also we work with the Ministry of Education because to become a first grader you had to get the right approval. So from what I've heard, it's been positive, but again, I'm not 100% sure because I'm not on the ground. My role is more in the U.S. So that's my best answer. Sorry.
We have time for 2 more questions if there are.
Yes.
You raised a good question, and I'm curious what the process would be, or the name for it, if there was a community-based selection process where those in the community agreed with each other which of the families were in most need. Like you said, it was based at least in part on income level or lack thereof. So that may help with avoiding getting the envy breeded among them if they themselves agree amongst themselves which in their neighborhoods most need to be enrolled in something like this?
Yeah, I would say as far as our selection process, the social workers are the ones, making that decision as far as the application process, doing the economic study. I think with the Parents Committee, which started this year, it's kind of a little bit of what you're saying, where they're trying to bring the needs of the community and the concerns of the community to Safe Passage to have more of a partnership. I think it's difficult though because there's such this survival mentality between the families that it is really competitive. There are a lot of problems in Guatemala with extortion, and so it's definitely a challenge that our families face as well, just harassment and extortion. And so I don't know. It would be interesting to try to involve the community more. I guess I'm a little skeptical of how that would work, but I love the idea of trying to work with them more. So it's more of a joint effort. And again, it's not this, it would be less of this idea of like, oh, we decided that you're the ones that need help.
Is there a term for that? Does that fit under appreciative inquiry, or
Could be something like either community capacity building or community empowerment. To the technical term.
Yeah, I think that would be really great.
Rachel, maybe one last question.
Sure.
I was really impressed with the fact that you had some statistics and some data there. Have you thought about measuring your impact, not just in economic terms, but also around the self-esteem and those other factors that you seem to put as objectives of the program as a whole? Is there any data on that?
There isn't any data yet. I think we're definitely wanting to move in that direction. I would say as far as getting data, we're in the beginning stages. I think, we've been going on and everyone's like, this is great. Yes, of course there's impact. Look, the children are, improving. But I would say just, this year, last year was just the beginning of that. I think with the census, that was a start. We also changed to a new database. And so we're in the process of implementing that in Guatemala. So we're able to track, students' attendance and enrollment and graduation, things like that. So I would say that's the first step. And then I think it would be great then to incorporate more, subjective things as far as self-esteem, because we definitely do see that as something we're reaching towards. But I would say at this point, we're not quite there yet, but I would love to see us get there. It's great to have the numbers to back up the anecdotes, And as far as my role, one of the things that I work on is our annual report. So this is our last one, and our current one is in process. But this is something we send out to most of our donors, and it's just a chance to, show our impact, show some snapshots of, what our program is doing, the improvements, successes, things like that.
So maybe then, Doc, if somebody was interested in doing their development field practicum with Safe Passage, what would be the next step?
You can talk with me, and I can connect you with our volunteer coordinator who is on the ground and is in charge of receiving volunteers.
What do you think as far as capacity with your staff, with the work you're doing? What's your greatest need? If you were looking at recruiting some of these students to do the interns, what's the greatest need right now?
On the ground? I would say, honestly, our biggest need, in my opinion, is kind of what we were talking about, moving more towards having data and having information about our programs, like the actual impact. But that's something, it hasn't been a high priority, and we don't really have people with the right skill sets. So if someone feels passionate about monitoring and evaluation, I know you probably haven't had that class yet, but once you do, you can let me know. But like getting the numbers to kind of back up, because our programs are good and they are having a positive impact, but we're just starting, to get the numbers as far as that is concerned. And a big need we have as far as the U.S. office, when we're applying for different grants and things like that, having that information, like specifics on our program. So like our English program, this is the percentage of graduates, and they've improved to this level and things like that. So we have all that information handy that we can pull from, because right now we have to go through this like painful process of calling people on Skype and trying to talk to the coordinator, and can't get a good connection and things like that. So I would say having that information on hand that's accurate and that shows our impact.
David, I'm sorry, I know that the staying true to your mission is critical, but given the extreme situations in the garbage dump area, what are you doing, or is there any environmental education impact as far as the health issue one, yes, but the environmental education piece of it?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think as far as our students, we're trying to incorporate that in their learning, like caring for the environment and things like that, and hygiene and sanitation, things like that. But I would say we're slowly starting to get involved in that area, but it's tricky too. We don't want to stray too far from our mission, but that is part of it. So I think right now it's just educating the students and their families. Yeah.
I know we could probably spend a lot more time talking, but Rachel is going to be here for a little while, and will be an opportunity for maybe 3 or 4 of you, if you want to have lunch with Rachel, Stan and Rachel are gonna go there. It's on us, and you know you have class at 1 o'clock, so you'll have about an hour, a little bit more, an hour to continue the conversation with us. So just let Stan know if you want to go to lunch, and again, we'll probably limit it to 3 or 4. If everybody wants to go, we'll think about that. But we have a bit of a budget, and there are going to be other speakers as well. So will you join me in thanking Rachel? Rachel, thank you.
Materials about St. Passage, you can come up, there's brochures and different things. And I would say if you are interested in learning more information, please sign the sign-in sheet with your name and your email, and you'll get our newsletters. And if you want information about volunteering, be sure to check the box or talk to me.
And just 2 things. One is, as is our custom, I'll ask somebody to pray for Rachel and for the Ministry of St. Passage. But the other thing, building on Dr. Yunander's question that Rachel answered about language, one of the things we recommend for students going into situations like this is to think seriously about doing language school for 2 or 3 months in the particular location before you then go on and fully work. So we have had students who then it's worked very, very well. So if you think about going to Latin America or Asia or potentially some areas of Africa, Middle East, wherever it might be, start thinking about looking for language schools if you don't have a language to build that up so that then you can be used even more effectively in your country as well. Do I have,
in the case of Spanish, we're in the United States, which is now the world's 4th largest Spanish-speaking country. So you can, if you want to learn Spanish while you're in Philadelphia, there's plenty of opportunities.
We don't want to distract them too much from their current state.
Right.
Very good. Well, do I have a volunteer who will pray for Rachel and for St. Passage?